In the beginning, God created. Then he created man in his own image. Then man created. Those who know him then are creative Christians.
Let's meet one of them now.
Lindsay Morgan Snyder is an author, podcast host, and content creator currently working on something fun and juicy for television. As a former marketing expert, ghostwriter, and leadership consultant, Lindsay brings creativity, humor, and personal development to the table. Lindsay's book, Letting Love In, How God Renews Relationships by Crushing Your Inner Critic, was an Amazon #1 new release. It inspired her now popular podcast, the Lindsay Morgan Snyder podcast, where she explores topics on loving yourself, Jesus in Hollywood, and overcoming that inner critic. Her newest project, being released later this year, is a YouTube exclusive podcast show called Letting Love In Live, where she interviews people from in and around Tinseltown on the subject of love. Coincidentally, the very city that shaped our idea of love for generations. This show will hone in on fun, real-life romantic stories from notable people to encourage us, make us laugh, and help us all connect better to God. Because after all, God is love. Hey, Lindsay.
Hi, how are ya?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm so good.
You're looking lovely. I mean,
Aww,
you really do.
thanks,
Really
Bill.
do. Hey, folks, this is Lindsay Morgan Snyder, and she's becoming one of my good friends, and I'm really excited about that. So, how are you doing? How's everything going?
You know, it's going a lot better than it was.
Really? Tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the creative journey can be kind of like a wild roller coaster sometimes,
Yeah, it really can.
It really can be. And there's a lot of
I know, and you got feet flying everywhere too. I mean, this is not something, creativity is not for the faint of heart, believe me.
Well, I want to learn from you, Bill, because you've been doing it a lot longer than I have. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster. There's some highs, there's some lows, there's some twists and some turns, but I feel like we're headed up on a high over here in my world. So that's exciting.
Tell me what that means.
Yeah, I think I believe there's a lot of healing that God wants to do before he releases us into certain areas of, our destiny or what he has, called for us to do. And I feel like he's always working through us, but there's moments where like bigger things open up for us. And the way I've always understood it is like, he wants to make sure that like the things inside are built to hold maybe what he's getting ready to do. And sometimes that's like excavating. Is that the right word? He has to excavate some things out in your life. And I felt like I've been in a season of excavation. Is that the right word?
Yeah, I almost feel like it's like an ice cream scooper. It goes down in there and gets out stuff that's going to stand in our way. And generally it has something to do with the sin in our lives and our lack of faith, or, just those kind of things. Because, a lot of this, what we do is kind of akin to high wire walking. You got to get that step right in front of the next step, and you have to trust God that you're not going to fall, and, all those kind of things. So, and there's a lot that stands in our way. Really is. What were some of the things that he was doing in your life, if you don't mind my asking?
No, I love it. I love real talk. So this is great. I think I lived in a ton of fear a lot of my life. I mean, fear, it was almost like fear guided me instead of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
It was almost like fear was my guiding light. I didn't know that. I wouldn't have called it fear. But that's exactly when I got to the real, when I got real with myself, that's what it was, you know? And so I think he was dealing with a lot of fear. I think that I really discounted myself in a way. Like I didn't think I was good enough. I, thought that expressing what I thought was like I was being too much. I either thought I wasn't good enough or I thought I was too much, instead of like just learning like I am who I am. Not everyone's going to like me. Not everyone's going to like what I produce or what I create, but that's okay because if I'm doing it with God, then I will touch the right people that he has for me to touch with what he's doing through me. And so I had to kind of get rid of that people pleasing, that, all that stuff was a real big problem for me. I could probably go on all hour telling you about all my problems, but those were some
you wrote a book on it, Crushing Your Inner Critic. That's, I mean, Satan just glories himself on amplifying all that garbage inside of us. Did that come out of your upbringing, or was that something that just you kind of developed because you were knocked around a little bit, or where did that all come from?
It's a good question. I think life is just kind of, the enemy will get you any which way, right? Like he'll get you when you're a kid, he'll get you when you're an adult. Like he just kind of, he's always after us in a way, and not in like a scary way, but the Bible says he's the father of lies. And he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So the way I look at it is he's always lying to us since we're kids, which is sad. He's always lying with us. He's taking a situation and he's just like, it's not always even the situation I've learned that happens to you. That's the hard part. It's the lies that come in after the situation happens. That's the hardest part. So I don't necessarily blame it on any major circumstance. I mean, yeah, I've had a lot of hard things in my life, like everyone has, I feel. I had a lot of medical issues as a kid, and spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital, didn't meet the Lord till I was 31. So definitely like caused a lot of my own pain, just by like not knowing how to, let men treat me. That was a big issue. Didn't understand boundaries, didn't understand self-respect. Like I didn't understand a lot of that stuff. So these are just things, no one's perfect. So those were some of my things I lacked in life. And then, the enemy just pummels on them. He just takes them and just offers you all of these options that then just create major pain in your life.
Yeah. What brought you to the Lord?
It's a great story.
Them's the kind I like.
It's a great story. So I was 29 when I moved from Ohio, which is where I'm from, to Atlanta, Georgia. And honestly, Bill, I was just looking for a better party. Okay. I was a party girl. I had a great life on the outside. You would have, no one would have known that anything was really wrong on the inside, unless maybe you were really intuitive and heard me talk deeply. But, I had a really fun life, honestly. A lot of friends, a great career, like all the good things were going on the outside. But on the inside, I was dying, scared, alone, like so hurt, so lots of scary issues going on the inside, but nobody knew on the outside. And so it was, yeah, my sister was a very strong Christian. And she would always send me Bibles and send me CDs from her church. And, and she was a very great person. I mean, she is a very great person. And, but I thought she was a little like over the top. Like I thought she was sort of a Bible beater, you know what I mean? And so I loved her, but I didn't really like pay too much attention to the stuff she sent me. And then, as they say, we run into our brick walls or whatever, but I was actually dating a really great Jewish guy. And my sister got really kind of distraught about it. Like she was like, why are you dating a Jewish guy? Like you're a Christian, da, 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 da. And I was like, oh, why does it even matter? What's the difference? I don't even know the difference between Jewish people and Christians. I didn't know. And my sister said, well, Jesus was Jewish And I can't remember exactly what she says, so please don't quote me on this, anyone. But, you know, she started to kind of ask me questions that I didn't really know the answer to. And so this fella and I broke up, and I was devastated, you know, how we are sometimes. And I was in my bedroom crying really hard. And I just kept hearing these thoughts say, "You are so ugly. You're disgusting. No one will ever love you. You're such a loser." It was in my head. It wasn't audible. It was in my head. And I felt like I was being beat over the head with like a crowbar. Like it was so painful. I was crying, and I just said the word God. That's all I said. And I didn't even believe in God really. But my sister had been talking to me about it, and I just said God. And all of a sudden, I heard clear as day, not externally, but internally, "I'm right here, Lindsay. I've always been right here." And that other mean voice, I call it the mean voice in my book, went away. And it was like this blanket of peace came over me. And and that was like my first like encounter with God. And I mean, it was so supernatural, you know? And so God, I didn't even believe in, spoke to me, and I knew it was God. And I didn't even believe in God. So it was very powerful. And then you know how God does, he just will then do all these little divine connections. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden you're like on a date, 4 vodkas in, and this guy starts talking about God. And you're like, "Do you know my sister? Like, how are you using this that my sister lives in Texas is saying, and you live in Atlanta? Like, do you know her?" It was super weird to me, you know? And so he started what I love about God is he'll meet you wherever you are, you know? If you're in the bar 4 vodkas in, he's not worried about it. You know what I mean? Like, what's the matter? He's so not worried. He is so not worried. So about 6 months after that, I was home in Ohio with at my mom's house, and my sister and I were talking, and I said to her, "Yeah, I met this guy, and he has a lot of peace, kind of like you." I always thought my sister's peace was just her personality. I didn't know it was a peace that came from Christ. And she looked at me, and I mean, Bill, she has said this kind of stuff to me for years, but in this moment was the moment that God chose to open my eyes. She goes, "Well, Lindsay, that's the peace you get from putting all your faith and trust in Jesus Christ." And I'm telling you, like it says in the Bible, the scales fell off my eyes, and I knew it was true. And I couldn't even express it to her because it was so intimate between me and God. I couldn't even tell her, you know?
It's an amazing moment, isn't it? I mean, it just, those people that don't know Christ, you know, they kind of look at us like we're kind of nuts, you know, that we just, you know, kind of think this way and so forth. But when God comes into our life, there's no denying it. You can't turn your back. You fall in with both feet, and you know you're doing the right thing. It's an incredible time. Keep going, keep going. I'm loving it.
Oh, I know. It's a good, God knew I love good stories. He knows I'm a storyteller, so he gave me a good story, which is so sweet. And so then that, you know, I flew home on the airplane back to Atlanta. And I just remember, like, I wouldn't have known what it was at the time, but I remember like an old time movie, like kind of film going across my eyes with all of my sin, you know, all of the like shenanigans that I had really done, you know. And I was bawling hysterically. And I don't remember anyone else being on the airplane, but it was like low cost airline, like AirTran, you know, so it was totally like
Fred's airline. Yeah.
it was filled with people, but I don't remember anyone being on the airplane. And, you know, later understanding, you know, scripture, I'm like, well, I was repenting from my sin, but I didn't know that's what it was called. And so then it was that right after that encounter, right after that, you know, conversation with my sister, I kept going to this little church, not little, actually it was not little. It's a massive church in Atlanta, Georgia, called Buckhead Church. It's by Andy Stanley. He's the main pastor there. And it's really set up for people like me, like kind of seeker people that might be like very kind of out in the world, partying, doing their business. Like their lives are probably going well in one area, but they do not know God. And it's really set up for that kind of crowd, which is really special. And so I would roll in there, you know, like after a few cocktails with my friends at brunch, you know, coming after the music, so music bothered me. but they were so welcoming. You know, there was like no shame, no judgment. Like just they knew who their audience was, which were people that were curious about God. And so I was in there one Sunday. So I would go there like once every few weeks. And then Easter Sunday, I went by myself. And well, I always went by myself. But I thought, God, if you're real, like, I don't want any weird church people telling me what's up. I need you to tell me. I need you to prove it to me. Or I said something like that. So I'm sitting in my seat, and the pastor's, he teaches so well, like just kind of like very life application based stuff, you know, which is what I needed, you know. And so he taught us about the Bible. He says the Bible is a series of books. And I might get this backwards, but it's like 44 authors, 66 different books. He explained it to us like intellectually, you know. And at the end, I thought, this is true, you know, and I was by myself. And so I said, so he goes, if you believe this is true, pray this prayer. And I thought, this is true. Like, I just knew, you know, I'm like, this is real. I'm 31. I don't know how I've missed this for 31 years, but this is actually very true. And so I prayed the prayer, and he goes, if you prayed this prayer for the first time, stand up. I thought, I am not standing up. Well, Bill, I just popped out of my seat and I popped. And I was like, oh, here I am. And I remember this gentleman behind me tapped me on the shoulder, and he goes, congratulations. And I thought, for what? You know, inside of on the outside of me, I'm like, thank you. On the inside of me, I'm like, for what? You know, and I walked out of church, Bill, 13 years ago. My life just slowly turned right around, completely around, and went in an opposite direction. And I haven't stopped since.
Well, one thing that I love to talk to folks your age is mainly because I really didn't start my productive, I would say, Christian walk until I was about 50. And it's so neat to see you having 20 years, you know, head start on what I was doing. Well, tell me about your podcast. You know, what your aims are for it, where you feel you are now, what are you doing with it, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I would say God tricked me into it, you know, which is always the best things, right? When God kind of tells you to do something and you're like, what? I don't even know how to do that. Like, yeah, do it. And you're like, okay. But that's kind of how it happened. I had 3 prophetic words about it. Basically, 3 different people randomly had said to me, I think you're supposed to start a podcast, Lindsay, you know? And I thought, I don't know how to start podcasts. I don't really know anything about podcasts. I don't even really listen to them, you know, but I'm smart enough sometimes to listen to God. So I thought, I think that's God. 3 times sounds like God. So I love to pray and listen to God. I love to ask for wisdom. It's probably my favorite scripture in the Bible, James 1:5. If you lack wisdom, come to me and ask, and I'll give it to you without measure. In my mind, I'm like, do we understand that the creator of the universe, who has all the wisdom, is telling us we can ask him for wisdom about anything and he'll give it to us? I'm like, because that's amazing. So I take him on that multiple times.
It's beyond amazing. I mean, we can go to that throne anytime we want. I mean, how many of us can go to talk to King Charles in England, you know? Yeah, anyway, keep going.
No, exactly. And I don't know, for some reason I hung on to that. And I've just gone there 1,000 times a day, you know, whether it's where are my keys or where do I park my car or big issues, you know, and he always helps me. So I'm like, this is great. So I said, okay, God, what do you want me to do my podcast on, since this is your idea? And I sensed he gave me two main things. One was do it in seasons so it can grow with you, which I thought was pretty wise, and be consistent. That's all he said. And then I'm like, well, what do I do it on? You know? And he said, well, do it on what you know, like do your first season about your book. Okay. So I had written a book called Letting Love In, How God Renews Relationships by Crushing Your Inner Critic. And so my first season is called like God is Love. And I just talk about love. I talk about talking to love. I talk about receiving love and, you know, but all about like God's love. Right. And during that season, I felt like God said, why don't you also interview your friends who work in Hollywood who love me? And I thought, well, I've never interviewed anyone before, but that sounds fun. So I reached out to a couple of my girlfriends who work in Hollywood, and they were like, sure, Linz, very basic bill. I took my phone and I was like at their house and I was like, da-da-da, da-da-da. Like we were interviewing like this, you know, but it was so fun. And so season 2 came. By this time, I'm having a great time. I'm like, God, what do you want me to do season 2 about? And he said, why don't you interview more of your friends that work in Hollywood and love me? And I thought, okay. And I started realizing I know all of these people that I don't really mean to know. They're just my friends, you know? So I did that. It was a really fun season. And season 3 was the inner healing of the artist. Because I love to talk about the inner world, our inner world, and how to get that kind of sorted out. And so talked to a lot of different people that work in Hollywood around that subject. And I also brought in therapists because I love therapy. I think it's so smart. I love psychology. I love the mind and the heart. And so that was season 3. And then season 4 was the storytelling business. So again, interviewed more people in and around Hollywood about just being a believer in Hollywood, which is really fun. And I took a little break and I said, God, like, what problem am I solving? Who am I helping with this? You know, why am I doing this? And I felt like he said, it's on the cover of your book. And I was like, oh. And I'm like, the inner critic? And he's like, yes. And he goes, why don't you do an expose on the inner critic? Exposing this mean voice that stops us from trying to pursue our creative dreams or influence culture or, you know, just open our mouth sometimes, you know? And I was like, okay. And then I felt like he was like, why don't you interview people that most people think would not have an inner critic? So models, you know, people that like maybe the rest of us ladies would think, oh, if I looked like her, then I wouldn't have an inner critic. But guess what, Bill? It's not true. Those people have the same inner critic the rest of us have, you know? The enemy is mean to all of us. So it was a fun season because I talked to deliverance ministers. I talked to my friend, like high influencers in Hollywood. I talked to amazing like entrepreneurs like Lindsay Snyder from In and Out. She's the president of In and Out Burger. I got to talk to Randy Spelling, who's Aaron Spelling's son, about the inner critic, and it's just been a great season. So when you ask me what are my goals, I'm asking him, God, what are my goals with this? But honestly, I love interviewing people. It's like I found it to be something that I love more than I would have ever imagined. I love people. I've always loved people. I find them fascinating. I love entertaining people. So I have some big dreams, but they'd have to be God, you know? And I think they probably are at some point, but that's where we're at.
Is there another book in all this?
Maybe, but I don't know if it's right now, you know? I think I'm more interested in like the kind of arts and entertainment industry more than the book industry, but I'm sure I'll write more books, but I don't think I'm going to do that next.
Yeah. You say you're interested in the arts and entertainment industry and so forth. Are you interested as an observer of it and someone who kind of brings out what's inside, or are you interested in being a part of it to actually entertain and so forth?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think both in a way. You know, I think I'm very fascinated by how the power it has to create culture. I think that's really fascinating to me. It was about 12 years ago that I felt the Lord. I said to God, I want to be a missionary and I'll go anywhere for you because I loved him and I wanted to tell everyone about him. And I'm like, I'll go anywhere. That was, you know, it was one of those faith moments where you're like, I'll do whatever you say. Not now, some days we're like, but you know, sometimes you have those moments where you're like, I'll go anywhere, God. And I was literally thinking overseas somewhere. I thought that'd be so great. And I felt he said, I need missionaries in Hollywood. And Bill, I didn't watch movies. I was like not interested in the entertainment industry at all. So it was very strange to me. Like I was like, what? Like they don't need help. Like my thought process was they don't need help. They have money. That's what I thought. In my mind, I thought I need to go where the people are suffering physically and I need to help them. And what God has shown me is that, well, like you, Lindsay, everything on the outside can look like it's going really well. But on the inside, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of brokenness. And so he kind of showed me that about this city. And so I came out here on faith. I mean, I had like a sales job and but I came out here without a plan. And it was kind of scary.
I bet.
I didn't really know anyone. I mean, it was like I'm not gonna lie, it was like not easy. It was very hard actually. And I didn't like Hollywood at first. I took a kind of a I don't know what you call it. It was like a class, like a 3-month class um that taught about like Hollywood. And I was like, heck no, like no way. There's no way. Like I do not like this at all, you know? And I was really scared, like super, super scared. And so yeah, that was 8 years ago. And so I'm kind of just on the journey with God, you know, like he is the one that's kind of unleashed some of these dreams about the entertainment industry in me. It was nothing I really ever thought about until, you know, I'm in my 40s, which feels a little strange. But, you know, he's taken me back to my childhood a few times. And my mom used to tell me that I loved the Johnny Carson show. Like, loved it. Like I was a little kid or like a child, you know, and I'd be like falling asleep and then the Johnny Carson theme song would come on and mom would go, you would get so excited, you'd wake up, you'd like dance, like you loved Johnny Carson. And so God started showing me that. He started showing me like these things that were maybe put in me by him 100 years, 45 years ago, you know? And so I don't know. He started to make some connections for me in Hollywood and, you know, but I want to leave it up to him, you know, like I want to just be a faithful, like step by step kind of gal. But he's asked me to dream and put some things together and yeah, so, and starting to write a script with some girls that you know who are amazing. So, you know, we'll see what God does. I want to stay on his path, you know, but I have some dreams.
No, I believe you do. You know, this in your introduction, you talk about something you're working on that's fun and kind of juicy for television. And I talked not long ago with one of your friends, and you guys seem to feed on one another, that's probably the wrong word. The idea is that you probably sharpen each other and get each one of you thinking, and I think it would be a kick to have fun, have coffee with all three of you sometime, and just a brain thing, you know, where all you're doing. I don't even remember what they call those things, but it's just, you know, you guys are so sharp, and you're so, you're just riveted on where you want to go, and God is riveting you there. He's giving you this fire inside, and that's neat. May I just tell you a story, if you don't mind? We're talking about a love for Hollywood, and I have that same love, or at least something that's comparable. And mine came from the fact that I came out of an alcoholic home. And so my Saturdays, just to get out of the house, was at the movies, you know, and this was back in the 50s, 40s and 50s. And, you know, you'd pay your quarter or your 40 cents or whatever it is, and you'd go in and you'd see Francis the Talking Mule, and you'd see, you know, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, and just thousands of cartoons, and that saved me in a lot of ways. And then I see what's going on in Hollywood, and I think if there's a place that Jesus is needed, it's there. And So anyway, I congratulate you for what you're doing. I think it's, and I'd love to someday. I definitely need to listen to your more of your podcasts than I have, because I it really helps me to know that Christ is busy now.
Yeah.
And he's working now.
Yeah.
What I'm dying to find out what's so new and juicy that you guys are working on. Come on, let's see. You can't throw that out and just ignore it.
Yeah, it's so sweet. Like, I would say one of my biggest journeys in life has been never being married. I'm 45 and I've never been married, and I'm very aware why I'm not married is because I was scared. I was scared of marriage. I was scared of men. Didn't know myself. Like, I mean, I had a lot of, just like stuff. And I kind of, in a way, knew better that marriage was not going to solve all my problems. That might have been one good thing of coming from a broken family, is that I knew marriage isn't going to fix my problems. So, in a way, that was kind of good, because then I didn't get married for the wrong reason, And so I don't regret my journey of being single until this point. But I did say to God when I moved to LA, God, how long am I going to have to sit in my fear of marriage? And he said, until you walk through it. To which I didn't really want to hear. And I said, well, what's the next right step? I asked God that a lot. What's the next right step? And he said, finish the book. And I was reading a book by Dr. Henry Cloud, because I love psychology, called How to Find a Date Worth Keeping. And it was, this book about like dating and like learning to date and like exploring, like learning about yourself and people and stuff. And so that inspired me. And it was a few months later, I was in Atlanta, and I was journaling with God, which is how I communicate with God. And I said, I'm stuck, God. I don't know what to do. And I felt like God said, do online dating. And I was like, this can't be God. This has to be the devil. I was like, there's no way this is God. It's like, I'm going to confirm this is you, because I don't think this is you. And a really sweet mentor friend of mine said, Lindsay, I wouldn't always, this was years ago, but she goes, I wouldn't always recommend this for everyone, because some people do like to take control and, this whole thing. It can be unhealthy for some people, but for you, knowing your history, knowing your fear, knowing that, I think this would be good for you. And I have to credit it to her, my friend Sarah Ott Deaton is her married name, but she said, look at it like school. And so, talk to God before you go on a date, ask him what he wants you to learn, go on the date, learn, and then after the date, come home and talk to God about what you learned, like take God on the dates with you, and I thought, okay, she confirmed it, because I thought she would say no, and she said yes. And I thought, oh geez, that has to be God. So that's a long story to say that was 7 years ago, and I've been on this amazing journey with God. It's like hilarious. There are hilarious parts of the story. There are kind of intense parts of the story, but it has been the coolest story of my life. And now we are turning it into a fictional, it'll be based on some reality, but a fictional rom-com, romantic comedy of these three gals who are, is it 3 or 4? Yeah. And we've just written the treatment, so it's still a little fresh, but we've got it all, not trademarked. We've got it all secured in the, the thing. So I didn't want to talk about it until that happened. But anyway, these 3 gals who are in their 40s, and they're not married, and they're all Christians, and they all come from different backgrounds, and they all just go on this like really fun journey. I like to say it's sort of like a healthier version of Sex and the City, but it'll be based in LA. But like, really beautiful scenery and clothes, stuff that women like, and but it's their adventures in dating, but it's very healthy, it's honoring men, it's honoring women, it's honoring our processes. It's not shaming any side of the sometimes shows do that, right? Like they'll shame the men, or they'll shame the women, or that just gets gross. And so I think my heart is to uphold both sides of the story, but also like get into the deeper side of what people really go through, but make it funny, and like our main character, she has a therapist she goes to, and so it's really about the inner world of these women, and then how they overcome their issues. And it doesn't all wrap up in a bow in season 1, so it's not, we're trying to keep it pretty real, but really fun and funny. And we had so much fun writing the treatment. I mean, we were laughing and running around and like, oh my gosh, it was so great.
Yeah, it sounds that way. I'd love to read it.
Yeah.
What are the occupations of these 3 women?
Oh, it's such
I'm interested to know.
Okay, let me remember here. So one of our characters is like a high level like fashion executive. One of our characters is a teacher, and one of our characters is a podcast host, actually. So yeah.
Now they're gonna deal with their occupations part of this, and the people they work with, and where do you see the men coming in their lives in this fictional thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of based on true stories, so it's based on slightly based on some people I know, including myself. But the men come kind of in and out of their lives, like it's honestly a little bit more of a journey of the women kind of getting past their issues in order to be ready for the men. So I personally think that sometimes we as women, I don't know if I'm going to get haters on this, but we blame the men. It's the man's fault. We're the good man. But honestly, Bill, sometimes it's our own little selves that are holding ourselves back, So the story is kind of more about the journey of the women and overcoming their issues, whether it be, they kind of hide, they hide in like kind of big clothes, or, because they have some fears. So it's these girls kind of overcoming their fears in order to be ready for these men. Now, not that all the men are, 100% perfect in the show either. They're not. They have some of their issues, so they kind of run into that a little bit. But it's really more about the internal journey of the women and how they need to kind of just maybe look inside a little bit and see what's going on inside in order to make themselves ready, for the men. And so it's a little bit more on the women's side of the story.
Yeah. Do you, in your mind, do you have the ideal man for you kind of mapped out?
Well, it's been an interesting journey. Like I used to not be able to even like think about it, like I was so scared of it. I couldn't even think about it. But as I've healed a lot, I don't know if this is in the show or not. It's kind of in the show, but there's a true story where I said, God, I don't even know what I'm looking for, but all I know is I want to be attracted to my husband in these 4 areas: mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. I'm like, I want to be attracted in those 4 areas. I don't even know what that means, to be honest, because I wasn't really very connected to myself. I didn't know what I wanted, which I think is a problem with a lot of people. And a lot of times I find that we blame God. God, you haven't brought my husband yet, when sometimes we have fears and we don't want to call them fears because we don't want to admit we have fear. And so instead we blame God or we blame men when maybe
or blame somebody, yeah, because these are heavy burdens to bear if you find yourself saying that I'm just not worthy. I'm just not, I'm not attractive. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this and I'm not that. From a man's perspective, if I might just throw this at you, I think the ideal man for a woman is the man who wants to lift up the woman and help her satisfy all her dreams. whatever those are, and actually put himself in the background, lifting up the woman. And I think, to be fair, what happens, at least what I've seen, is God takes care of the man so that, he's not left out. He gets what he needs, and the man gets satisfaction from seeing his wife successful and seeing his wife happy and fulfilled. And my fantasy is that one day you meet one of those for you, because you have great dreams and you have great abilities, and I mean, you're a beautiful woman. So you need, as a partner in all of this, someone who recognizes all that and wants you to rise to whatever level you want to rise to. And in the meantime, you're gonna have a very soft spot in your heart for him because he's doing these things. Mm-hmm. And you'll try to do the same for him. It's not something you look for. No, you don't look for it. God brings it. I don't know. I'm about to lose you here. This thing is telling me that we're about over, which I think is really too bad. But to me, the model is in Downton Abbey, when Edith finally meets that. You've seen Downton Abbey? Everybody's seen Downton Abbey, where she meets the guy she's going to marry but doesn't know it, and he comes to her office to help her put things together, and it's all about her for him. And that's the kind of guy you want. The problem today is that men and women don't want to give 100%. They want to keep 75% out so they can ride their motorcycles and go on their trips and do all this kind of stuff, because they think that they have to take care of themselves, and they don't. God takes care of us, and he takes care of us better than we take care of ourselves. So again, we are running over and all that kind of thing, but I want to thank you very much for taking time to be with me. I just wish you all the best. I really do. You're just a sweetie, and God bless you, and God bless Jess and Emily, and on your march here, and we'll see you again very soon. Okay.
Absolutely. Bill, thank you so much. It's been such an honor. And when I meet that special guy, I'm going to bring him over. Okay. So you can check him out.
Okay. Sounds like a deal. Okay. God bless you, sweetheart.
Bye.
We'll talk to you later. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Next, we're going to talk to a Christian author who writes for readers who expect the unexpected, which must be working because her works have sold over 5 million copies. But it's not just the readers who love her. Those who award for achievement love her as well. She's won the coveted Christie Awards, several Angel Awards, and the gold and silver medallions from the Forward Magazine's Book of the Year Award, and more. And it's time to reward yourself. Join us next time. Until next time, be a creative Christian.